Lisa Martinez walked through the glass doors of the Galactic Commercial Arbitration Center on Proxima Station. Her black briefcase felt heavy in her hand as she made her way to Courtroom 7. The station buzzed with activity around her. Aliens, of every shape and size, moved through the corridors, speaking in languages that sounded like music, clicks, or electronic beeps. She had been practicing law for 12 years on Earth before taking this assignment. Representing humans in Galactic, court seemed like an adventure. Now looking at the strange creatures around her, she wondered if she had made the right choice. Her client, Jake Thompson, waited outside the courtroom. He was a cargo hauler who moved goods between star systems. Jake had worked the shipping lanes for 15 years without any major problems. Today he faced charges that could end his career. "How are you feeling, Jake?" Lisa asked as she approached him. Jake rubbed his weathered hands together. "Nervous as hell, if I'm being honest. These Zenthari folks, they don't mess around when it comes to business." Lisa nodded. The Zenthari Trading Consortium controlled most of the shipping contracts in this sector. They were known for being tough but fair. At least that was their reputation. "Remember what we discussed," Lisa said. "Let me do the talking. Answer only direct questions from the judge. Stay calm." They entered the courtroom together. Lisa had seen pictures of galactic courtrooms, but seeing one in person was different. The ceiling stretched high above them, with soft blue light coming from panels that seemed to float in the air. The judge's bench was made from what looked like living crystal that changed colors slowly. Around the courtroom, various aliens took their seats. The Zenthari looked like tall, thin humans made of clear crystal. Light moved through their bodies in patterns that Lisa thought might be their way of showing emotions. The Galloids sat in special chairs that could hold their blob-like bodies. They changed colors constantly, shifting from blue to green to purple. Judge Vexithera entered the room. She was a Zenthari, over 7 feet tall, with silver light flowing through her crystal body. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "This court is now in session. We are here to resolve the matter of the Zenthari Trading Consortium versus Jake Thompson, regarding breach of shipping contract and suspected contraband transport." Lisa felt Jake tense beside her. They had prepared for the breach of contract charge. The contraband accusation was new. The prosecutor, Kethmore, rose from his seat. He was also Zenthari, but darker crystal with red light pulsing through him. "Your Honor, the defendant willfully delayed the delivery of rare lithium crystals from the Kepler mines. This delay cost my clients significant profits. Furthermore, we have evidence that the defendant used this delay to transport illegal goods." Lisa's training kicked in. On Earth, she had handled cases involving false accusations and planted evidence. She recognized the setup immediately. The Zenthari were using the contract dispute to cover a more serious accusation. They probably hoped Jake would accept a small penalty for the delay rather than fight the bigger charge. They were wrong. "Your Honor," Lisa said, standing up, "I object to the introduction of new charges without proper notice. My client was informed this hearing would address contract timing issues only." Judge Vexithera's crystal body flickered. "Counselor Martinez, the charges were filed according to galactic procedure. Please continue, Prosecutor Kethmore." Kethmore smiled, which looked strange on his crystal face. "As I was saying, sensors at the Kepler station detected unusual energy signatures from the defendant's ship. These signatures are consistent with banned quantum processors." He activated a holographic display showing sensor readings and shipping manifests. The evidence looked damning at first glance. Jake's ship had indeed shown unusual energy readings during the loading process. Lisa studied the display carefully. Something was wrong with the timestamps. The energy spikes happened before Jake's ship arrived at the station. "May I examine this evidence more closely?" Lisa asked. "Of course," Kethmore said confidently. Lisa walked to the display and began pointing out details. "Your Honor, these sensor readings show energy spikes at 14:32 station time. However, the docking manifest clearly shows my client's ship didn't arrive until 14:47. How could his ship produce energy readings 15 minutes before it arrived?" The courtroom went quiet. Kethmore's red light pulsed faster. "The timestamps must be incorrect. Station equipment sometimes has calibration issues." "Really?" Lisa's voice grew sharper. Then let's look at the other ships that docked that day. She manipulated the holographic display, calling up records for every ship that had used the station. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls as she cross-referenced arrival times with energy readings. Here we see the Andorian freighter Starwing. Energy spikes at exactly the time it docked. The Vulcan transport Crystal Song. Same thing. Energy readings match arrival times perfectly. Every ship except my client's shows accurate timestamps. Lisa turned to face Kethmore directly. Are you telling this court that the station's sensors were broken for exactly 15 minutes, only when measuring my client's ship, and then worked perfectly for every other vessel? The prosecutor's light turned from red to orange. In Zenthari, body language Lisa had learned, this meant embarrassment or anger. The evidence speaks for itself, Kethmore said weakly. Yes, it does, Lisa replied. It speaks of falsified records and manufactured evidence. She walked back to her table and pulled out a datapad. Your Honor, I have here the complete shipping manifest for my client's cargo. Every item accounted for, every serial number verified, every piece of documentation in order. She handed the datapad to Judge Vexathera. I also have statements from dock workers at both the origin and destination ports confirming that my client's cargo was never unsealed during transport. Judge Vexathera reviewed the documents. Her crystal body grew brighter as she read. Lisa wasn't finished. Furthermore, I have security footage from the Kepler station showing my client's ship from the moment it docked until it departed. The cargo bay was never opened during the loading process. She activated another holographic display. The footage showed Jake's ship arriving at the station. Workers loaded sealed containers while Jake remained in the cockpit. The cargo bay stayed closed. The entire time, my client followed every regulation, filed every required form, and transported legitimate cargo according to his contract. The only thing he did wrong was trust that he would be treated fairly by the Zenthari Trading Consortium. The aliens in the courtroom began making various sounds. The Geloids turned bright yellow, which Lisa thought might mean surprise. Several other species Lisa didn't recognize seemed to be whispering among themselves. Kethmore tried to recover. Your Honor, even if the timing discrepancy exists, the energy readings clearly show unusual signatures from the defendant's ship. Lisa smiled. It was not a kind smile. You mean the energy readings that happened before my client arrived? The readings that coincidentally match the signature of the Zenthari patrol ship Darkstar, which was docked at the same station during that exact time period. She pulled up another set of records. Patrol ship Darkstar, commanded by Captain Velthor, who happens to be Prosecutor Kethmore's brother. The courtroom erupted. Several aliens made loud noises that sounded like gasps or shouts. Judge Vexathara's crystal body flashed bright white light. Order, the judge called. Prosecutor Kethmore, do you have an explanation for these coincidences? Kethmore's light dimmed. He looked down at his notes and shuffled through them without speaking. Lisa pressed her advantage. Your Honor, this entire case is a fraud. My client was set up because he refused to pay bribes to certain Zenthari officials for faster processing of his shipping permits. When legal corruption failed, they decided to destroy his reputation with false charges. She walked to the center of the courtroom. Every alien in the room watched her with wide eyes or whatever they had instead of eyes. The evidence is clear. The timestamps prove the sensor readings were falsified. The security footage proves my client never accessed his cargo during the alleged time window. The connection between the prosecutor and the patrol ship commander proves this was a planned setup. Lisa looked directly at Judge Vexathara. I demand all charges against my client be dismissed immediately. Furthermore, I demand an investigation into the criminal conspiracy between Prosecutor Kethmore and Captain Velthor. The silence in the courtroom felt heavy. Judge Vexathera's crystal body flickered through several colors before settling on a steady blue glow. After reviewing the evidence presented, the judge said slowly, I find the prosecution's case to be without merit. All charges against Jake Thompson are dismissed. She turned toward Kethmore. Prosecutor, you will remain after this session to discuss these serious allegations. Jake Thompson let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like hours. Lisa gathered her papers and put them back in her briefcase. As they prepared to leave, Lisa noticed something strange. Every alien in the courtroom was staring at her. Not at Jake, not at the judge, but at her specifically. Their expressions were hard to read, but she got the feeling they had never seen anything quite like what had just happened. Outside the courtroom, Jake shook her hand vigorously. "Lisa, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my career." The news traveled fast through the galaxy's communication networks. Within 3 days of Lisa Martinez's victory at Proxima Station, every major law firm, trading post, and diplomatic station had heard some version of what happened in courtroom 7. On the mining world of Titan's Edge, Synthari merchant Colvex was explaining the incident to his business partner. The human lawyer destroyed Kethmore completely. She proved he was lying about everything, made him look like a fool in front of everyone. His partner, a Geloid named Splorsh, changed from green to worried purple. How did she know to look at the timestamps? That's what I'm telling you, Colvex replied. She saw through his trick in minutes like she could read his mind or something. Similar conversations were happening across dozens of worlds. Each telling made the story bigger and more dramatic. Some said Lisa had used aggressive body language to intimidate the prosecutor. Others claimed she had somehow hypnotized the judge. A few versions suggested that humans possessed natural telepathic abilities that let them see through lies. Attorney General Patricia Hayes sat in her office on Earth, reading reports from human diplomats stationed throughout the galaxy. The messages painted a concerning picture. The first report came from Ambassador Tony Clark on Kepler Station. "Madam Attorney General, we have a situation here. Human attorney Danny Rodriguez represented a colonist in a land rights case yesterday. 2 hexapod judges had to be taken to the medical bay after his closing argument. They said they felt like they were being hunted." Patricia frowned and opened the next message. This one was from New Geneva, a major trading world where many species came to do business. "Attorney Amy Foster handled a personal injury case here last week," the message read. Her closing argument was so emotional that several Geloid jurors started flashing bright red and yellow. Their doctors said it was equivalent to a panic attack. The case had to be postponed while they recovered. More reports kept coming. On Rome, Harmony Station, lawyer Kevin Park's cross-examination techniques had caused a Kelvori arbitrator to request a transfer to a different court system. On the research world of New Cambridge, attorney Susan Miller's opening statement had made a Tritonian judge declare a mistrial because he felt emotionally manipulated. Patricia realized this was becoming a serious diplomatic problem. She called an emergency meeting with her senior staff. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said as her team gathered in the conference room, "we have a situation developing across the galaxy. Our attorneys are apparently terrifying alien legal professionals." Her deputy, Frank Williams, looked confused. "What? Do you mean terrifying? They're just doing their jobs." "That's exactly the problem," Patricia replied. "What we consider normal courtroom behavior is being seen as some kind of psychological warfare by other species." She activated the wall display and showed the compiled reports. In the past month, human lawyers have caused medical emergencies, panic attacks, and at least 6 mistrials across 12 different star systems. The room went quiet as everyone read the reports. "Are we doing something wrong?" asked Linda Carter, the head of the Interstellar Legal Relations Department. "That's what we need to figure out," Patricia said. "I want a full analysis of what's happening out there." Meanwhile, on the neutral world of Harmony Prime, the Galactic Bar Association was holding an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to discuss what they were calling the human problem. Chief Arbiter Zentholan of the Ethereal Collective floated above the assembly, his translucent body glowing with concern. "Fellow beings, we face an unprecedented situation. The arrival of human legal practitioners in our courts has created widespread disruption." Judge Morthek of the Regellian Republic spoke next. His rock-like body made grinding sounds as he moved. 3 of my colleagues have requested reassignment rather than face another human attorney. They described the experience as traumatic. "But why?" asked Counselor Silvana from the Vegan Confederacy. "What makes human legal practices so different from our own?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Walsh, a human xenopsychologist, stationed at the embassy, had been invited to provide expert testimony. She stood at the speaker's podium, looking out at hundreds of alien faces. Honored members of the association, she began, I believe I can explain what you're experiencing. The assembly fell silent. Many of the aliens had never heard a human speak in their formal chambers before. Human legal systems evolved very differently from yours, Elena continued. Most of your species developed cooperative approaches to conflict resolution. You prefer consensus, mediation, and peaceful agreement. She gestured to the diverse crowd. The Xanthari seek harmony through crystal-clear logic. The Geloids change colors to show their emotional state and work toward mutual understanding. The Ethereals float above conflict entirely, looking for higher truth. Several aliens made sounds of agreement. Humans are different, Elena said. Our legal system comes from a species that evolved as hunters and tribal competitors. We see legal proceedings as a form of controlled combat. What you call aggression, we call thorough preparation. Chief Arbiter Zentholan's glow shifted to a curious blue. Are you saying that human attorneys deliberately try to intimidate their opponents? Not deliberately, Elena replied. They're just applying the same intensity they would use in any important situation. A human lawyer preparing for court is like a hunter preparing for a difficult hunt. They study every detail, anticipate every move their opponent might make, and plan strategies for every possible outcome. She paused to let this sink in. When Lisa Martinez destroyed that prosecutor's case on Proxima Station, she wasn't being cruel. She was being thorough. She had studied galactic commercial law, researched the prosecution's background, and prepared for exactly the type of fraud attempt she encountered. The assembly erupted in discussion. Various species made their equivalent of surprised sounds. Judge Morthek spoke again. You're telling us that what appears to be psychological warfare is simply human legal preparation? Exactly, Elena said. And there's more. Humans have something we call courtroom presence. We use body language, vocal tone, and eye contact to establish authority and credibility. What seems threatening to you is actually just confidence. A Tritonian representative raised one of his many arms. But the emotional manipulation, the way they make witnesses break down under questioning? Elena nodded. Cross-examination is an art form in human legal culture. We believe that truth emerges through rigorous questioning. A skilled human attorney can spot inconsistencies, read body language for signs of deception, and apply pressure until the witness tells the truth. This sounds like interrogation techniques used by military forces, observed a Kelvori delegate. In a way it is, Elena admitted. Many human attorneys study psychology, body language, and even military tactics as part of their training. The courtroom is seen as a battlefield where truth fights against lies. The chief arbiter's glow turned worried yellow. How can our legal professionals compete against such tactics? That's not the real question, Elena said. The real question is whether you want to exclude an entire species from your legal system, or find a way to accommodate different approaches to justice. She looked around the chamber. Human attorneys aren't trying to destroy your legal traditions. They're just practicing law the way their species evolved to handle conflicts. The results speak for themselves. They're very good at uncovering truth and achieving justice for their clients. Back on Earth, Patricia Hayes was meeting with legal experts to understand the situation better. Professor Gary Nelson from Harvard Law School had been studying the reports. The problem, he explained, is that we're dealing with species that have never experienced adversarial legal systems. They're used to collaborative approaches where everyone works together to find solutions. So our normal courtroom behavior seems aggressive to them? Patricia asked. More than aggressive, Professor Nelson replied. To them, it probably seems like we're trying to dominate and destroy our opponents rather than seek justice. Patricia sighed. But that's not what we're doing. We're just being thorough. I know that, and you know that, the professor said. But to a species that evolved cooperative problem-solving, our methods look like warfare. Meanwhile, the effects were spreading beyond just courtrooms. On the trade world of Commerce Prime, business negotiations involving humans were becoming tense affairs. Alien negotiators were requesting human-free meetings, claiming they felt pressured and intimidated. Ambassador Betty Murphy sent a worried message from the diplomatic station at Alpha Centauri. The situation is getting worse. Several alien species are starting to view all human professionals with suspicion, not just lawyers. They think we're all using some kind of psychological manipulation techniques. The misunderstanding was growing into a galaxy-wide diplomatic crisis. Stories about human legal tactics were becoming more exaggerated with each telling. Some versions claimed that humans could force anyone to tell the truth just by staring at them. Others suggested that human attorneys used secret Earth mind control techniques. On the research world of New Berlin, scientist Dr. Carl Jensen was studying the phenomenon from an evolutionary perspective. The message arrived at Steve Collins' office on Mars Colony 3 on a Tuesday morning. The Korthak Empire wanted human legal representation for their biggest territorial dispute in 50 years. Steve read the contract terms twice before believing them. The payment alone would set him up for life. Steve had been practicing corporate law for 8 years. He specialized in complex business deals and contract negotiations. His military background as a former Marine gave him an edge in high-pressure situations. The Korthak request seemed perfect for his skills. 2 weeks later, Steve stood on the transport ship looking down at the Korthak homeworld. The planet looked red and rocky, with massive cities built into mountain ranges. Everything about it seemed designed for war. Even the landing platforms looked like fortresses. General Krextar met him at the spaceport. The Korthak leader stood, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating that looked like black metal. His forearms ended in clawed hands, and his eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. "Human lawyer," Krextar said in broken standard. "You are smaller than expected." Steve looked up at the massive alien. "Size isn't everything, General. Sometimes the smallest weapon can win the biggest battle." Krextar made a sound that might have been laughter. "We shall see. The Vegans think they can trick us with their clever words. They have been preparing this trap for many months." As they traveled to the capital city, Krextar explained the situation. The Vegan Confederacy claimed that an old treaty gave them rights to 3 star systems that the Korthak had controlled for generations. The case would be heard in the Great Hall of Justice, the most important court on the Korthak homeworld. "The Vegans sent their best lawyer," Krextar said. "Silandra has never lost a case. She has been studying our laws for a year, looking for weaknesses." Steve nodded. He had researched Silandra during the trip. She was brilliant, experienced, and had a reputation for setting legal traps that destroyed her opponents' cases before they realized what was happening. The Great Hall of Justice was enormous. The ceiling stretched hundreds of feet above, supported by columns carved to look like ancient Korthak warriors. Thousands of seats surrounded the central floor where the legal arguments would take place. Korthak tradition demanded that all participants stand throughout the entire proceeding. Steve smiled when he heard this. His Marine training had prepared him for much worse than standing for a few hours. Silandra arrived with a team of 12 assistants. She was tall and thin like most Vegans, with pale green skin and large black eyes. Her team carried dozens of data tablets and reference books. They set up their equipment with military precision. Steve carried 1 briefcase and a single data tablet. Several Korthak observers looked worried when they saw how little preparation he seemed to have done. Chief Justice Korthan called the court to session. He was ancient even by Korthak standards, with battle scars covering his armor plating. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. The Vegan Confederacy claims territorial rights to the Sigma, Delta, and Gamma systems based on the Treaty of Distant Stars, signed 400 years ago. The Korthak Empire disputes this claim. Present your arguments. Silandra rose gracefully. Her voice was soft but carried clearly through the hall. Honored Justice, the Treaty of Distant Stars clearly establishes vegan rights to any uninhabited systems within 50 light-years of our borders at the time of signing. She activated a holographic display showing star charts from 4 centuries ago. As you can see, the 3 systems in question were uninhabited when the treaty was signed. They fell within our territorial claim zone. For the next 2 hours, Silandra walked the court through hundreds of legal precedents, treaty interpretations, and regulatory frameworks. Her presentation was flawless. Every argument was supported by evidence, Every claim backed by legal authority. Steve watched carefully, taking notes but saying nothing. The Korthak observers began to look nervous. Silandra's case seemed airtight. She concluded with a masterful summary. The law is clear, the precedents are established, and the evidence is overwhelming. The Vegan Confederacy has rightful claim to these systems under galactic law. The hall fell silent. Chief Justice Korthan looked at Steve. Human lawyer, present your response. Steve stood slowly. He walked to the center of the hall, hands behind his back, looking up at the thousands of Korthak faces watching him. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the massive space. 400 years ago, the Vegan Confederacy signed a treaty claiming rights to uninhabited systems. Today, they want to take systems that have been Korthak homes for centuries. They call this justice. He turned to face Silandra directly. But I have a question for my learned colleague. When exactly did the Vegans plan to enforce this claim? Silandra looked confused. I don't understand the relevance of that question. Let me make it clearer, Steve said. He began walking slowly around the hall, his voice growing stronger. The Treaty of Distant Stars was signed in 2387. The Korthak established colonies in the Sigma system in 2401. That's 14 years after your treaty. He stopped walking and faced the court. The Vegans knew about Korthak colonization. They received reports from their own survey ships. They watched as Korthak families built homes, started farms, and raised children on these worlds. Steve pulled out his data tablet. I have here communication records from Vegan diplomatic archives. In 2405, Ambassador Velthar sent a message to the Vegan Council, describing the rapid Korthak expansion into previously claimed territories. The hall began to buzz with conversation. Chief Justice Korthan called for order. The Vegans knew. Steve continued. They knew for decades, they knew for centuries, and they said nothing. He turned back to Silandra. Why didn't the Vegan Confederacy enforce their claim in 2401, or 2450, or 2500? Why wait until now? Silandra's confidence began to crack. The timing of enforcement doesn't affect the validity of the legal claim, doesn't it? Steve's voice grew harder. In human law, we have something called laches. It means you can't sleep on your rights for centuries and then suddenly wake up demanding justice. He activated his own display, showing a timeline of Korthak colonization. The Korthak have been living in these systems for 300 years. They've built cities, established governments, created entire civilizations. Millions of Korthak call these worlds home. Steve began pacing again, his marine training showing in his controlled movements. The Vegans want this court to believe that a piece of paper signed 4 centuries ago is more important than the lives of millions of beings who have known no other home. He stopped in front of the Vegan legal team. But there's something else my colleague hasn't told you. Something hidden in those carefully selected legal precedents. Silandra's team began shuffling through their documents nervously. The Treaty of Distant Stars included a clause requiring active territorial management within 50 years of signing, Steve said. The Vegans had to establish some form of presence or administration in claimed territories within 5 decades, or the claims would be considered abandoned. The hall erupted. Thousands of Korthak voices rose in surprise and anger. Chief Justice Korthan pounded his gavel repeatedly. Silandra went pale. That clause was superseded by later agreements. Which agreements? Steve asked sharply. Name them. The Galactic Commerce Accords of 2442 modified territorial claim requirements. Steve smiled. It was not a friendly expression. The Commerce Accords dealt with trade routes and shipping lanes. They had nothing to do with territorial sovereignty. Would you like to try again? For the next hour, Steve systematically destroyed every argument Silandra had made. He showed how she had misquoted treaty sections, ignored crucial legal precedents, and overlooked fundamental principles of galactic law. The truth, Steve said as his presentation neared its end, is that the Vegan Confederacy abandoned any claim to these systems centuries ago. They had their chance to establish territorial control and chose not to take it. He walked to the center of the hall again. Now, after 300 years of Korthak civilization, they want to undo history, Because they think they can find a legal technicality. Steve's voice rose to fill the enormous space. This isn't about law. This is about power. The Vegans want these systems because they've become valuable. They want to take away Korthak homes because they think they can get away with it. He pointed at Silandra. They thought they could overwhelm the Korthak with clever legal arguments and confusing precedents. They thought they could use the law as a weapon against people who couldn't fight back in court. The hall was completely silent now. Every Korthak eye was focused on Steve. But they made one mistake, he said quietly. They assumed the Korthak would fight this battle alone. Steve turned to face Chief Justice Korthan. Your Honor, the Vegan claim is not only legally invalid, it's morally bankrupt. I ask this court to reject it completely and to impose sanctions on the Vegan Confederacy for bringing a frivolous case designed to steal the homes of millions of beings. When Steve finished speaking, the silence lasted for several minutes. Chief Justice Korthan looked at the evidence, read through the legal documents, and consulted with his advisors. Finally, he spoke. The court finds that the Vegan territorial claim is without merit. The motion is denied in its entirety. The emergency session of the Galactic Judiciary Council convened on the neutral world of Concordia 3 weeks after Steve Collins's victory in the Korthak case. Judge Supreme Morthok of the Ancient Tribunal called the meeting to order as representatives from over 200 species filled the massive chamber. The holographic display at the center of the room showed disturbing statistics. In the past 6 months, human attorneys had been involved in 47 incidents that caused what the report called significant psychological distress to alien legal professionals. Fellow beings, Judge Supreme Morthok began, his stone-like body grinding as he moved. We face an unprecedented crisis in our judicial systems. The arrival of human legal practitioners has created widespread disruption across multiple sectors. The first piece of evidence was security footage from Kepler Station. It showed human lawyer Kevin Park conducting a cross-examination of a Kelvori witness. The alien's crystalline body began flickering rapidly as Kevin pressed him about inconsistencies in his testimony. After 20 minutes of questioning, the Kelvori collapsed and had to be carried from the courtroom. The witness required 3 days of medical treatment, reported Dr. Zilvera from the Kelvori Medical Board. He described the experience as feeling like his mind was being dissected by a predator. More footage followed. Attorney Susan Miller's opening statement in a personal injury case on New Geneva had caused a Tritonian judge to declare a mistrial. The judge explained that he felt emotionally manipulated and could no longer think clearly about the evidence. On the trade world of Commerce Prime, lawyer Bobby Taylor's closing argument had triggered panic responses in 6 different alien species simultaneously. The courtroom had to be evacuated when several witnesses began showing signs of severe stress. The pattern is clear, said Counselor Veltana from the Andromedan Coalition. Human attorneys are using psychological warfare, techniques that our legal professionals cannot handle. Judge Silvash from the Vegan Confederacy floated forward. Her voice carried anger and frustration. After the Korthak incident, we conducted a detailed analysis of human legal tactics. What we found was disturbing. She activated a new display, showing brain scans from various alien species. These scans were taken from legal professionals before and after encounters with human attorneys. The changes are dramatic. The scans showed stress patterns, elevated hormone levels, and what the medical reports described as fear responses typically associated with life-threatening situations. Human lawyers trigger our fight-or-flight responses, Dr. Silvash explained. Their aggressive questioning, intense eye contact, and confrontational behavior activate primal fear centers in our brains. Chief Arbiter Zentholan of the Ethereal Collective drifted above the assembly, his translucent form glowing with concern. The question before us is simple. How do we protect our legal professionals from what appears to be a form of psychological assault? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Carl Jensen, the human xenobiologist, had been studying the problem from Earth. His research was presented by Ambassador Helen Torres from the Human Diplomatic Corps. Dr. Jensen's findings suggest that what we're seeing is an evolutionary mismatch, Helen explained to the assembly. Humans developed in environments where verbal aggression often prevented physical violence. Our legal systems reflect this adaptation. She showed comparative evolutionary charts. Most of your species evolved cooperative conflict resolution because you lived in stable environments where group harmony was essential for survival. Humans evolved in competitive environments where individual success often meant group survival. The display showed human courtroom behavior from various angles. What appears to be aggression is actually sophisticated communication designed to establish truth through controlled conflict. Human attorneys aren't trying to harm their opponents. They're trying to win by proving their case more convincingly. Several alien representatives made sounds of disagreement. But the effects are the same, protested Judge Corvell from the Rigelian Republic. Regardless of human intentions, our legal professionals are suffering genuine trauma. Helen nodded. Dr. Jensen acknowledges this problem. His research suggests several possible solutions. The first option was complete separation. Human cases would be heard only by human judges in human-controlled courts. This would eliminate the psychological stress on alien legal professionals, but would also create a two-tier justice system. Unacceptable, declared Chief Arbiter Zentholin. Such segregation would violate our most fundamental principles of equal justice. The second option was extensive training programs for alien lawyers. They would learn to cope with human legal tactics through exposure therapy and psychological conditioning. This would require years of preparation, said Dr. Zilvera, and we have no guarantee that such training would be effective. The third option was restricting human legal practices. Humans would be required to modify their courtroom behavior to avoid triggering stress responses in alien participants. Attorney General Patricia Hayes, attending via a holographic link from Earth, responded firmly to this suggestion. We cannot ask our legal professionals to deliberately provide inferior representation to their clients. That would be both unethical and ineffective. The debate continued for hours. Various species presented their own experiences with human attorneys. The stories were remarkably consistent. Intense preparation, aggressive questioning, and an unwillingness to back down that seemed almost predatory to alien observers. Finally, Captain Nina Bradley of the Human Colonial Defense Force requested permission to address the assembly. Her presence surprised many delegates who wondered why a military officer was participating in a legal discussion. Honored representatives, Nina began. I've been listening to this debate for hours, and I think you're approaching the problem from the wrong angle. She stood at the speaker's podium, her military bearing evident even to alien observers. You keep talking about human attorneys as if they're a security threat, so why not treat them like one? The assembly erupted in confused chatter. Several species demanded clarification. I'm suggesting enhanced security protocols, Nina explained. If alien legal professionals feel threatened by human courtroom behavior, provide them with security that makes them feel safe. She activated a display showing various security measures used in high-risk situations. Armored bailiffs trained in crowd control and de-escalation. These personnel would be present during any legal proceeding involving human representation. Chief Arbiter Zentholin's glow shifted to interested blue. Explain this concept further. The bailiffs would serve multiple purposes, Nina continued. First, they would provide psychological comfort to alien participants who fear human legal tactics. Second, they would ensure that any human attorney who crosses ethical boundaries faces immediate intervention. She showed images of the Gorvani species, large, heavily armored beings known for their calm demeanor and impressive physical presence. The Gorvani have a reputation for fairness and protective instincts. Their presence would reassure alien participants while remaining neutral in the proceedings. But this would stigmatize human attorneys, protested Ambassador Torres. Would it? Nina asked. Or would it simply acknowledge that different species have different approaches to conflict resolution? The bailiffs wouldn't be there to control humans. They'd be there to help everyone feel comfortable during legal proceedings. Dr. Silvash from the Vegan Confederacy spoke up. This proposal has merit. Our analysis shows that alien stress responses decrease significantly when security personnel are present. Judge Supreme Morthok considered the proposal carefully. The enhanced security protocols would be mandatory for all cases involving human legal representation. Correct, Nina replied. It would become a standard requirement, just like court reporters or translators. Part of the infrastructure needed to ensure fair proceedings for all species. The debate shifted to practical concerns. How would the bailiffs be trained? Which species would provide them? How would the costs be covered? Over the next several hours, the details were worked out. The Gorvani volunteered to provide the majority of bailiff personnel. Their natural armor and calm temperament made them ideal for the role. Training programs would be established on neutral worlds and cost would be shared among all member species. The most contentious issue was whether to require the protocols for all human attorneys or only those involved in high-stakes cases. After heated debate, the Council decided on universal application. Any legal proceeding involving human representation will require enhanced security protocols, Judge Supreme Morthok announced. This includes the presence of trained armored bailiffs and additional medical support staff. The vote was closer than expected, 127 in favor, 98 against, with 23 abstentions. Many alien species remained concerned that even these measures might not be sufficient to contain what they saw as humanity's natural legal advantages. Attorney General Patricia Hayes reviewed the decision with mixed feelings. On one hand, it allowed human attorneys to continue practicing throughout the galaxy without restrictions on their methods. On the other hand, it officially classified human legal behavior as requiring special security measures. 6 months after the enhanced security protocols went into effect, Attorney Rachel Green stood outside the courthouse on Commerce Prime. The building looked different now. 2 massive Gorvani bailiffs flanked the entrance, their natural armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. Their calm, steady presence had become a familiar sight at courtrooms across the galaxy. Rachel was about to begin the largest corporate fraud case in galactic history. She represented a consortium of human colonies against the stellar banking cartel, who stood accused of stealing billions of credits through falsified loan documents and hidden fees. The case had attracted attention from every major news network in the galaxy. Inside the courthouse, Courtroom 1 had been completely redesigned to accommodate the new security requirements. The Gorvani bailiffs, Thekvar and Moldan, stood at attention near the judge's bench. Their forearms and thick armor plating made them look like living fortresses, but their gentle eyes and calm demeanor reassured the alien participants. Judge Veltara, a senior Xanthari jurist, had requested this assignment specifically. She wanted to see how the new protocols worked in practice. The crystal formations on her head glowed with curiosity as she watched the various species take their seats. The opposing legal team was impressive. The stellar banking cartel had hired 12 of the galaxy's most experienced corporate lawyers, led by Kethavel of the Andromedan Coalition. They had spent months preparing for human legal tactics, studying recordings of previous cases and developing counter-strategies. Rachel sat alone at her table, reviewing her notes one final time. She had learned to adapt her approach since the protocols began. The intensity and thoroughness remained, but she had refined her techniques to work within the new system. As the session began, Judge Veltara addressed the courtroom. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge the enhanced security protocols now in effect. The presence of our Gorvani colleagues is not a reflection on any individual's character, but rather an accommodation to ensure all participants feel secure during these proceedings. Thekvar, the senior bailiff, nodded respectfully. His voice was deep and reassuring when he spoke. We are here to serve justice for all beings. Please proceed with confidence. The difference was immediately noticeable. The alien attorneys and witnesses appeared more relaxed. Knowing that neutral security personnel were monitoring the proceedings seemed to ease their concerns about human legal tactics. Prosecutor Kethavel began his opening statement. He was tall and thin like most Andromedans, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. His preparation was evident in every word. Honored Judge, the evidence will show that my clients acted within established banking regulations. The human colonies signed complex loan agreements with full knowledge of the terms and conditions. For the next 2 hours, Kethavel presented a carefully constructed case. He had clearly studied human legal methods and attempted to adopt some of their techniques. His questioning was more direct than typical Andromedan style, and he maintained steady eye contact with witnesses. Rachel watched with professional interest. The galaxy's legal community was adapting faster than anyone had expected. Alien attorneys were learning from human methods while maintaining their own cultural approaches. When her turn came, Rachel stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, not just studying the evidence, but also considering how to present her case effectively under the new protocols. Your Honor, this case is about more than banking regulations. It's about trust, honesty, and the responsibility that powerful institutions have to the people they serve. She activated a holographic display showing financial records from dozens of human colonies. The evidence will show that the stellar banking cartel engaged in a systematic scheme to defraud hard-working colonists of their life savings. Rachel's presentation was masterful, but different from the aggressive style that had shocked alien observers in earlier cases. She maintained the thorough preparation and logical precision that characterized human legal work. But her delivery was more measured. She walked through the evidence methodically, explaining how the banking cartel had hidden fees and complex subclauses, manipulated interest rates without proper notification, and deliberately created confusion to prevent customers from understanding their real obligations. The defendants will tell you this was standard business practice, Rachel said, turning to face the opposing counsel. They will claim that sophisticated financial institutions have the right to protect their interests through complex legal language. She paused, letting her words sink in. But sophisticated institutions also have sophisticated responsibilities. They cannot claim ignorance when their actions harm the very people they promised to serve. The cross-examination began 3 hours later. Rachel called the first witness a stellar banking executive named Dearmoth. The Centaurian looked nervous as he took the oath, his tentacles curling and uncurling with anxiety. Dearmoth, Rachel began gently. You've worked in banking for 30 years, correct? Yes, that is correct. And you understand the importance of clear communication with customers? Of course. Clear communication is essential to good business. Rachel nodded and smiled. Her questioning remained respectful, but persistent. Then, perhaps you can explain why loan document 847B uses the phrase adjusted variable rate calculation methodology, instead of simply saying, we can change your interest rate. Dearmoth's tentacles twisted nervously. Legal precision requires specific language. I see. And this legal precision, does it help customers understand their obligations, or does it hide important information in confusing terms? The witness began to stammer. Rachel pressed gently but relentlessly, using the same techniques that had shocked alien observers in previous cases, but with a softer delivery that seemed less threatening. Throughout the examination, the Gorvani bailiffs maintained their calm presence. Their watchful eyes and steady demeanor seemed to reassure all participants that the proceedings were under control. The breakthrough came on the 4th day of testimony. Rachel was questioning the cartel's chief financial officer about internal communications when she uncovered a smoking gun. Ms. Zilandra, Rachel said, displaying an internal memo on the courtroom screens. Can you read the subject line of this message for the court? The Vegan executive looked at the document with growing alarm. It says Project Confusion, maximizing profit through customer ignorance. The courtroom erupted in gasps and surprise sounds from various species. Judge Veltara called for order, while the crystal formations on her head glowed brighter with shock. And this memo was sent to all regional managers? Rachel asked. Yes, but it was taken out of context. The context being a systematic plan to confuse customers so they wouldn't understand they were being overcharged. Zilandra's green skin turned pale. That's not. We never intended. Rachel spent the next hour walking through dozens of similar documents. Internal emails discussing optimal confusion strategies, training materials teaching employees how to maximize customer uncertainty, and profit projections based on enhanced fee collection through complex disclosure methods. The evidence was overwhelming. The stellar banking cartel had deliberately created a system designed to steal money from customers through confusion and deception. During closing arguments, Kethvel made a valiant attempt to salvage his case. He argued that complex financial products required complex language, and that sophisticated institutions couldn't be held responsible for every customer misunderstanding. Rachel's closing was different from the passionate speeches that had become legendary in earlier human cases. Instead of dramatic rhetoric, she spoke quietly and directly to Judge Veltara. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. The defendants didn't just make mistakes or use poor judgment. They created a deliberate system of fraud that stole billions of credits from hardworking families." She gestured to the mountain of evidence displayed around the courtroom. The documents show planning, implementation, and celebration of this theft. The testimony shows knowledge, intent, and complete disregard for their customers' welfare. Rachel paused and looked directly at the judge. Justice doesn't require complex legal theories or sophisticated arguments. It requires honesty about what happened and consequences for those who chose to profit from deception. Judge Veltara deliberated for 3 hours before returning with her verdict. The evidence presented by Counselor Green is compelling and comprehensive. The court finds the stellar banking cartel guilty of systematic fraud against their customers. She ordered the cartel to pay full restitution, plus damages totaling 15 billion credits. Several executives were referred for criminal prosecution. The ruling would force major changes in galactic banking regulations. As the courtroom cleared, something remarkable happened. Kethvel approached Rachel with genuine respect in his manner. "Counselor Green," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "That was extraordinary advocacy. You achieved justice for your clients while maintaining dignity for all participants." Around them, representatives of dozens of species conducted business in an atmosphere that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. The Gorvani bailiffs had become accepted parts of the courthouse community,